I accidentally took home the tumor report that was meant for filming. During dinner, my contract wife Jessica suddenly asked me, "How many months are left?" I thought she was asking about our 1-year marriage contract, so I replied, "Very soon, probably only 2 months left." Jessica fell silent. Later, I went abroad for a low-profile 3-month study program. When I came back, I heard from friends that Jessica had searched everywhere in the country for her supposedly deceased husband, even causing a huge stir, insisting, "Alive. I must see the person. Dead. I must see the body." Chapter 1: The Misdiagnosis Fiasco. I ordered a whole table full of takeout, just about to dig in, when Jessica, whom I hadn't seen for months, suddenly sat down across from me. I looked up at her with some surprise, though we had been married for over a year. Jessica Lynn and I had barely seen each other. She was always distant, and sharing a meal was a rarity. As her assistant once said, "You two are just in a contract marriage that lasts 2 years. Don't overthink it. When the time comes, take the money and leave. A woman like Miss Lynn is far beyond your reach." Jessica sat down casually, but from the top of her hair to the tips, she radiated the natural arrogance of someone always surrounded by admiration. I was a man who had struggled for 10 years just to barely touch the edge of her world. Indeed, she was out of my league. That's why I always kept my distance. Aside from money and resources, I never asked about things I shouldn't. Jessica seemed to have rushed over directly from her company, still in her haute couture business attire, sitting silently across from me while I ate. A drop of hot pot broth nearly splashed on her, making her pause for a second. Then she suddenly asked, "How many months are left?" I gave her a puzzled glance. Jessica was always busy with work. For someone like her, time was money. Had she really come all this way just to ask me how much time was left on our marriage contract? She probably thought a man like me was a disgrace to her household and was eager to see me gone. After calculating the time carefully, I reassured her, "About 2 months left. Don't worry, Miss Lynn. When the time comes, I'll leave on my own. I won't trouble you." Upon hearing this, Jessica suddenly went quiet. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice carrying an almost unnoticeable emotion. "Then in this final stretch of time, do you have any wishes?" Since signing the marriage contract with Jessica, I had already gained more than enough resources from her. So I shook my head and said, "No need. I don't have any other wishes." Maybe it was just my imagination, but I thought I saw Jessica's eyelashes tremble lightly when she heard that. Jessica had been acting strangely lately. Before, I could only see her once every few weeks, but now, she was staying at home every day. One morning, after replying to my agent's messages, I looked up and saw Jessica sitting quietly in the living room, watching me. I felt a chill down my spine, but quickly smiled and said, "Miss Lynn, aren't you going to the company these days?" Jessica shook her head and said, "The company's matters aren't important right now." I recalled the news I had gotten this morning from my agent, that Domingo had returned to the country. Then I glanced at the wine bottles on the table in the living room, and nodded knowingly. Jessica's assistant once specifically told me that the reason Jessica asked me to sign that 1-year marriage contract was because my face resembled her childhood sweetheart by about 70%. Jessica's childhood sweetheart was named Domingo, a rising star in the entertainment industry who skyrocketed to fame 2 years ago thanks to a web drama. It was said that Jessica had invested heavily in that drama, but after Domingo gained popularity, he decisively broke up with her and went abroad. Jessica signing the marriage contract with me was nothing more than a way to spite Domingo. I couldn't help but sigh at this. As expected, the love games of the rich were nothing like ours. Ordinary working-class people like me were only ever meant to be insignificant side characters. Since I had just finished filming a melodramatic, domineering CEO chasing after love drama, I could finally rest at home for a while. While cleaning my room, I suddenly remembered the filming prop I had accidentally brought back from the set last time. It was a tumor report, but after turning my backpack inside out, I still couldn't find it. I figured Marco must have seen it and thrown it away as trash. It wasn't really a problem. I could just explain it to the director later. Not wanting to disturb Jessica, who was in the living room lost in thoughts of her childhood sweetheart, I stayed in my own room, playing video games while eating snacks. When I laughed, I accidentally choked on water and went into an uncontrollable coughing fit. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Jessica's slightly anxious voice came from outside. "Has it gotten worse again? Are you in pain?" I was coughing so hard I couldn't speak, so Jessica immediately pushed the door open. At that moment, I was coughing violently, looking up at her with tears streaming from my eyes, appearing as though I was in terrible agony. For once, Jessica, who was always so composed, panicked. While dialing her assistant, she looked at me and said, "Don't worry, I'll have Laura take you to the hospital right away." I finally managed to catch my breath, glanced at Jessica in confusion, and said, "What's the use of going to the hospital?" What I actually meant was, "I just choked on water, what's the use of going to the hospital?" But Jessica froze for a moment, staring at me in a daze, and murmured, "You're right, There's no point anymore. With only 2 months left, there's truly nothing medicine can do. Chapter 2, A Frightening Reunion. Standing face to face with Jessica, she remained in the same posture, motionless, lost in thought. I glanced at the still-running video game and felt that my rare vacation time was too precious. Clearing my throat, I took the initiative to break the strange atmosphere and said, "Miss Lin, if nothing's wrong, I'd like to rest alone in my room. Is that all right?" It was as if she suddenly snapped back to reality. In her noble, distant eyes, a rare trace of sorrow flickered. When Jessica Lin knocked on my door again, I felt a bit helpless. Today, I had seen her more times than all the previous days of our marriage combined. The smell of alcohol on Jessica was even stronger than before. Her usually immaculate hair was now a messy tangle. She spoke. "Do you have time tonight? I'd like to take you to a dinner party with some friends. We've been married so long, and none of my friends have met you yet." I looked at Jessica with surprise. Over a year into our marriage, I had always known my place. At best, I was an unpresentable substitute. Wouldn't bringing me to meet her friends be embarrassing for her? Or was it because Domingo had returned today, and she wanted to humiliate me in front of her friends to draw Domingo's attention? After thinking for a while, I asked Jessica, "Will Mr. Domingo also be there tonight?" For an instant, Jessica's expression flickered with confusion. After a pause, she nodded. I replied knowingly, "I understand." Most of Jessica's friends were wealthy heiresses with powerful family backgrounds. Just the clothes on their backs were worth as much as my paycheck for an entire drama. When Jessica and I entered the room, everyone's eyes turned toward me, their gazes full of scrutiny. They didn't seem like easy people to get along with. Walking ahead of me, Jessica suddenly stopped, and I almost bumped into her. Then, I realized someone had lightly taken my hand. This was the first physical contact Jessica and I had ever had since getting married. Her palm was slightly cold, and paired with her always expressionless face, it made me strangely curious. What was someone like her? Always calm and in control, truly like when it came to matters of the heart. After just a few steps, a familiar voice came from behind us. "Sorry, everyone. I just got off the plane, so I'm late." It was Domingo. That face, 70% similar to mine, paired with a bespoke suit, made him look impossibly handsome. Next to him, my cheap outfit made me look like a shabby country bumpkin reeking of poverty. I quickly released Jessica's hand, afraid Domingo would mistake us for a real couple. Jessica, walking just ahead of me, froze for a moment. It seemed she gave a bitter smile, her voice nearly inaudible. "Do you still hate me this much?" Although I had long known Jessica's status was extraordinary, seeing Domingo being surrounded by a group of wealthy young women and seated at the center still left me feeling a surge of emotion. Truly, money was absolute power. I knowingly chose a seat in a corner, not far away. Jessica casually responded to meaningless questions from those around her, but lifted her eyes toward me. Earlier, when she saw that I hadn't sat beside her, there was a moment of hesitation. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but after a long pause, she turned silently away and didn't press me further. Jessica, someone well-versed in handling big occasions, usually had no change in expression, but now, it was obvious she was in a bad mood. Her eyes grew darker as she sipped her wine slowly, her entire presence wrapped in a chilling aura. Instinctively, I glanced at Domingo. Perhaps others hadn't noticed, but I had been watching the interactions between him and Jessica closely. I had seen Domingo deliberately pretend not to notice Jessica, walking past her as if she didn't exist, greeting everyone else in the room but purposefully ignoring her. It turned out the rumors online about Jessica and Domingo were indeed true. Selena, who had a fairly close relationship with Jessica, seized a moment when no one was paying attention, patted Jessica on the shoulder, and said, "You two still haven't found a chance to clear things up, have you?" Jessica pressed her fingers against her temple, clearly feeling frustrated. Selena clicked her tongue with mock mischief and teased, "Hesitating like this, that's not your style. Careful, or someone might swoop in and steal him away." Jessica lifted her eyelids and gave Selena a glance. Selena immediately shrugged and corrected herself. All right. Who'd even dare to steal a man from you? I was just joking." Before Jessica could reply, Selena suddenly glanced around and asked curiously, "By the way, where's that husband of yours? Haven't seen him all night." Jessica followed her gaze and frowned when she saw the empty seat. At that moment, I was hiding in the restroom, not because I didn't want to come out, but because the scene outside was unbearably awkward. Domingo and his friend were chatting casually, completely unaware someone was inside the restroom overhearing them. "So, are you still on the outs with President Lin? Honestly, who would have thought someone like her would be so loyal to you? She even deliberately found a husband who looks 70% like you. But honestly, that guy's no match for you." Domingo gave a light snort, adjusted his clothes in front of the mirror, and said, "I'll keep her hanging for a while longer. One day, when I'm in the mood, I'll just crook my finger and she'll come running back. But you'd better be careful, after this long Cold War, If President Lin ever comes to her senses, where will you find another sugar tree that's this devoted to you? Who else could she possibly fall for, besides me, that husband she married as a knockoff of me? Inside the stall, I froze, my hand pausing on the doorknob. I hesitated over whether to open the door or not. They had been talking too long, and my legs were going numb from standing, but if I opened the door, the three of us would be face to face, awkward beyond words. Better to wait a little longer. I'd have to remind Jessica to increase my allowance. After all, standing here to save her childhood sweetheart Domingo from embarrassment was costing me dearly. Not long after, a knock suddenly came at the restroom door. Jessica's voice called from outside. Hello, excuse me, is anyone inside? Bruno glanced at Domingo with envy and said, she just disappeared for a while, and already she's come looking for you so worriedly. Domingo couldn't hide his smugness. Raising his eyebrows, he said, told you. Who else could she love, if not me? Then Jessica spoke again. Excuse me, is my husband in there? He hasn't come out for a long time. I'm worried something might have happened. The restroom went quiet for a moment. Then with a creak, the stall door opened. I walked out stiffly, facing Domingo head on. We stared at each other in stunned silence. I forced a laugh and said, what a coincidence. You're here too. Neither of them said anything. Domingo's face paled, then darkened, and he quickly strode out. When he brushed past Jessica, he shot her a harsh glare. Jessica walked forward, and I followed behind them, signaling desperately with my eyes. He's mad. Hurry up and chase after him. Don't just stand there, idiot. Jessica looked at my expression, frowning in confusion. What's wrong? Has your illness gotten worse? I rolled my eyes inwardly. What illness? I'm young and perfectly healthy. Don't curse me like that. Trailing behind Jessica, Selena suddenly asked curiously, what illness? That's when I finally noticed Selena. I'd met her before. She had been Jessica's childhood playmate. Rumor had it she'd dated countless boyfriends. Tonight she'd brought along a rather unusual boyfriend to the dinner. A college student who had been seated right next to me. Among the extravagant, jealousy-inducing outfits around us, he stood out in his simple jeans and hoodie, looking shy and nervous. Out of boredom, I had even tricked him into drinking with me. Inwardly, I sneered, Selena, toxic girl. Jessica didn't bother to explain much. She only replied to Selena lightly, you wouldn't understand. Chapter 3, Drunken Confusion. She turned her head toward me. Truthfully, I didn't understand either, but as Jessica's contract husband, I would never ask about things I wasn't supposed to care about. When we returned to the private room, a group of people were gathered around Domingo. Noticing Jessica's return, Bruno deliberately raised his voice and said, Domingo, don't be sad. A woman like that isn't worth it. The room went silent. No one dared to respond. Nobody wanted to offend Jessica. Seeing the awkward lull, Bruno felt embarrassed and added even louder, even if you two are in a fight, does she have to hurt you so much on purpose? She knows better than anyone how much pride you have. Suddenly, a timid voice interrupted, but I thought President Lin's husband isn't you. Isn't it wrong to talk like this? I froze, following the sound. It was Selena's quiet, bookish boyfriend, clutching his glass nervously, actually speaking up on my behalf. Bruno's face darkened, about to retort, when Selena cut her off sharply. Her actual husband is right here. What are you even doing? Stirring things up like this? I was stunned. Instinctively, I turned to Jessica, only to see her eyes on Bruno and Domingo, icy and terrifying. After a long pause, she finally spoke. Where's security? If they cause trouble again, throw them both out. Not only I, but even Domingo, lifted his head in disbelief, staring at Jessica with a cold expression. The dinner ended on a sour note. When we got home, I had just closed the door and turned around, only to nearly bump into Jessica, standing motionless in the dark living room. Clearly, she was in a bad mood. Normally self-disciplined and restrained, Jessica rarely drank or smoked, but now, so close to me, her perfume was laced with the faint scent of wine, wrapping around me. I didn't dare move. If I did, my heartbeat might give me away. After a long moment, I heard Jessica speak, her voice carrying a trace of suppressed emotion. I have something to tell you. The atmosphere was strangely tense. For some reason, I felt nervous and replied, go ahead. Then suddenly remembering, I added, actually, I also have something I need to tell you. Just then, a phone rang, cutting her off. After a moment of hesitation, Jessica answered. It was her assistant. Her brows furrowed instantly as she said, what did you say? A funding collapse? She rushed out the door in a hurry. Just before leaving, she stopped, turned back to me, and said, very soon. I didn't have the heart to trouble her further, so I never told her about my plan to go abroad for further studies. Acting required more learning, and on a friend's advice, I decided to pursue advanced training overseas for 3 months in a low-profile way. As I boarded the plane, I had already planned it all out. After 3 months of training, when I returned, The contract period with Jessica would be nearly over. While I was away, she wouldn't have to see me, and when I came back, we could quietly finalize the divorce, allowing me to throw myself fully into my career. Once abroad, sticking to my thrifty habits, I changed to a local SIM card. For 3 months straight, I cut myself off from the world and immersed myself in learning. It wasn't until I returned to the country, just after getting off the plane and switching back to my old SIM card, that I froze at the flood of 99+ missed calls and countless unread messages. The only people who knew about my trip abroad were my roommate, who told my parents back in the countryside, and my closest friend. As for my agent and the company, I had formally requested leave. At that moment, a push notification popped up. The headline from a gossip account called Entertainment Circle Rumor Guide read, "Another tragic love story, refusing to give up on her deceased husband. The famous Lynn Group CEO has scoured the country, determined to see him one last time, alive or dead." I read that line over and over again, standing in the wind, utterly bewildered. Lynn Group's CEO referred to Jessica Lynn, that much I knew, but I couldn't figure out if I had misunderstood, or if Jessica had found herself a new husband. Who exactly was this deceased husband they were talking about? Back at Jessica's villa, the house was eerily quiet. Everything looked exactly as it had when I'd left. Even the half-finished juice I'd forgotten on the table was still there, untouched. I fell silent. It had been 3 months. That thing should have fermented by now. My room had been locked. I couldn't even go inside to retrieve my bank book. That was the hard-earned savings of over 10 years of work. Feeling depressed, I sank onto the sofa. The living room was littered with empty wine bottles. Clearly the cleaning lady hadn't come for months. I picked up a broom and began tidying up, deciding I'd put the place in order one last time before the contract ended. Just then, the villa's door opened. Jessica was back from the company. It was only 2 in the afternoon. Normally, as a workaholic, Jessica would still be in meetings at this hour. But now, she had no makeup on, wore casual clothes, her eyes red-rimmed, her head lowered. Jessica was always meticulous about her image, tailored suits, slim waist, long legs, cold and polished. But at this moment, she looked so disheveled that I wondered if her company had gone bankrupt. Jessica took off her jacket, lifted her head, and met my eyes as I sat on the sofa. She froze for a moment, then rubbed her eyes tiredly and muttered, "Haven't slept well in days. I must be hallucinating." I was speechless and said, "What hallucination?" Jessica's hands stilled. She stared at me with wide eyes, then suddenly staggered forward, grabbed an unfinished bottle of wine from the table, took a heavy swig, and walked straight up to me. The alcohol on her breath made it clear she wasn't fully sober. Before I could react, Jessica cupped my face in both hands. Her gaze wavered with raw emotion, and then she rose on her toes and bit down hard on my lips. Her arms wrapped around my waist as she pressed herself desperately into my embrace. Her scent, perfume layered over years, filled my senses, making my heart race uncontrollably. I tried to push her away while waking her up. "Jessica, I'm not dead." When she heard my voice, she looked up at me. Her eyes were frighteningly red. She squeezed them shut and rasped in a hoarse voice, "Even if it's just a dream, if I can see you in it, let me dream a little longer." "Dream my ass," I muttered. God, I hated dealing with drunk people. Jessica's actions only grew more frantic, as if terrified I would vanish the next second. Exhausted, I gave up resisting. Just as I relaxed my arms, Jessica suddenly closed her eyes and collapsed into me. Panicked, I checked her breathing. Thankfully, she had only passed out from exhaustion and lack of rest. Still, I was at a loss. What on earth had gotten into her? When I called the cleaning lady to come over, she was clearly startled to hear my voice. I explained, "Did Jessica tell you I was dead?" "I'm not. I'm alive and perfectly fine." Her voice only grew more anxious. All right, I'll come right away. I'll be there immediately." But even after waiting until 8 that evening, the cleaning lady never came. Jessica never woke up, and my room remained locked. I spent the entire time calling people, trying to figure out what had happened. Finally, I pieced it together. The cleaning lady had taken a photo of a tumor report and shown it to Jessica, convincing her that I had a terminal illness. That report must have been the filming prop I had lost on set. And recalling all the strange questions Jessica had asked me before, I suddenly understood everything. Chapter 4, The Truth Revealed. So that was it. When Jessica asked me how much time I had left, she hadn't meant how long until our contract ended, but rather how long I had left to live. And when I told her 3 months, she took it literally. Thankfully, Jessica had only recently begun posting missing person notices online. If I'd come back any later, there wouldn't have been a farewell party, there would have been a memorial service. By the time Jessica woke up, it was already past 11 p.m. She opened her eyes, stared blankly at me for a moment, rubbed her temples, and then just sat there dazed. I forced a crooked smile and greeted her. "Miss Lynn, you're finally awake." Jessica nodded silently. I gave her a quick explanation. "I'm not dead. I'm perfectly fine. I just went abroad for 3 months of advanced training. I meant to tell you last time, but you were rushing to the company, and I didn't want to bother you. That tumor report was just a filming prop from a drama I worked on. Jessica froze for a few seconds, her eyelashes trembling slightly before she spoke again. A filming prop? I drew a deep breath and said, yeah, I accidentally brought it home. The room fell silent for a while. Then, in a hoarse voice, Jessica asked again, so, you're really not dead? Of course not. Jessica's lips moved slightly. She lifted her eyes once more, only to frown at my mouth. Why are your lips so swollen? What were you doing abroad? Terrified she might create an even bigger fiasco than throwing me a memorial, I hurried to explain. Don't you remember? You were drunk last night. Jessica froze again, and in an instant her cold, aristocratic face flushed red. She coughed awkwardly twice and muttered, forget it. Since that misunderstanding is cleared up, there's still official business. The reason I came back this time was to finalize the divorce. Our 2-year marriage contract has ended. Do you have time tomorrow? No. Jessica answered herself immediately. I pressed on. What about the day after? Or the day after that? No time. Jessica looked at me and said, you know how busy I am with work. I went silent. Truthfully, I wasn't in any rush about this. I had hurried back because I thought Jessica was desperate to divorce me. After all, wasn't she supposed to be chasing after Domingo? But thinking about it more carefully now, this whole fiasco felt strange. I could sense that Jessica seemed to harbor a stronger than usual attachment toward me. Yet wasn't I only supposed to be Domingo's substitute? Back when Jessica and I had just gotten married, I hadn't been immune to developing feelings for her. After all, Jessica's beauty was the kind that could easily make a young man's heart race. Living together for more than a year, even with someone you dislike, it's hard not to develop some sort of feelings. But I quickly reminded myself over and over, Jessica and I belonged to different worlds. Her heart was still fixed on someone else. I could fall for anyone but her, because falling for her would only make my feelings look pitiful. So I forced myself not to care about Jessica's life. Whatever didn't concern me, I never asked. And any sprout of feeling that dared to emerge, I crushed it back into the soil before it could grow. I didn't know whether the emotions Jessica was showing me now were the habits formed after more than a year of living under a contract, or simply the flutter of feelings for a substitute she mistook me for in place of Domingo. But either way, I couldn't accept them. So I gave Jessica a faint smile and said, then pick a time, and let's quickly get the divorce procedures done. I won't bother you these next few days. I'll go rent a place of my own in the meantime. The next time I ran into Domingo, it was because he came to my place on his own accord. He sized me up slowly, sipped his tea with confidence, and finally opened his mouth. Do you know why Jessica married you? I nodded calmly, finishing the thought for him. Of course, because I look somewhat like you. She used me as your substitute. Domingo froze for a moment, then sneered. Since you already know that, why do you keep staying by her side, getting in my way? You should know that as soon as I apologize to Jessica, she'll rush back to me without hesitation. I nodded and replied, that's why we'll be divorced in the next few days. Domingo clearly hadn't expected that. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, speechless for a moment. After a pause, he let out a cold laugh and said, good, as long as you understand. Don't pester her again. Domingo was about to leave, but when he opened the door, he came face to face with Jessica. I couldn't tell how long she had been listening, and I felt a bit embarrassed for the two of them. Looking at Jessica, Domingo's tone suddenly grew heavy and sincere. It was my fault. I never should have gone abroad. Please, come back to me. Jessica frowned, stepped aside, and said, Mr. Domingo, please have some self-respect. Don't say things that cause misunderstandings. Domingo stiffened. Proud as he was, this was the first time he had ever admitted fault, and to be rejected so mercilessly enraged him. What do you mean? Jessica, I've already apologized. What more do you want? Jessica, however, looked at him calmly and said, shouldn't I be the one asking you that? You've been pestering me all this time. What exactly do you want? Sensing the taste of scandal in the air, Jessica went on. You've deliberately dragged me into rumors just to gain popularity. I gave you face and didn't hold it against you. What more do you want? Then she turned to me, catching me red-handed eavesdropping on the drama. And you, standing there watching the show. Last time, I didn't get to finish what I wanted to tell you before you left. Today, I'll make everything clear. Hearing Jessica's words, I realized this really was a bombshell scandal. Back then, when Domingo's web drama had been abandoned halfway due to the investor pulling out, the director pushed Domingo to attend a dinner party to seek sponsorship. But sponsorship was just a polite way of saying it. What they actually wanted was to force him into unspoken rules. By coincidence, Jessica had also been at that dinner. Seeing Domingo harassed by an overweight rich woman, Jessica stepped in to save him and ended up funding the entire drama herself. Jessica had always kept herself pure and aloof, unlike other heiresses who partied recklessly. Because of that, all sorts of rumors spread, saying Domingo was Jessica's childhood sweetheart whom she loved but couldn't have. Given Jessica's powerful family background, Plenty of people went out of their way to flatter her, feeding her vanity, letting gossip spiral unchecked. Over time, even Domingo himself came to believe those rumors. Right, if Jessica didn't like him, then why would she spend so much money on such a trashy web drama with the worst reputation? All for the sake of some boy who wasn't even related to her. If Jessica didn't like him, then why would she never bother to clarify the rumors? But this time, Jessica didn't bother sparing Domingo's pride. Her gaze on him was rather cold as she said, "Do you know why I've always been too lazy to hold you accountable for the things you did to me? You should really thank that face of yours, because instead of fading out of sight, you only got more and more popular." My eyes widened in shock. After all this circling around, it turned out we were both just substitutes. Jessica looked at my stunned expression with some amusement. She took my hand and said, "Do you remember where we first met?" Of course I remembered. After I later learned who Jessica really was, I worried about it for a long time. The first time we met was on a plane. At the time, Jessica had just returned from studying abroad. I've always been naturally outgoing, so when I saw how beautiful she was, I deliberately struck up a conversation. I told her I was actually an actor, though the kind that ranks way out in the 18th tier. Jessica glanced at her financial newspaper and replied absent-mindedly with a simple mm. I pointed at a building that was almost about to pierce through the clouds and said, "That's my father's company." Jessica finally reacted, casting me a slightly surprised look. Then she pointed to the taller building next to it and said, "The one beside it is my father's company." I secretly mocked her in my heart. What a ridiculous brag. Who didn't know that the tallest building in the city center belonged to the Lynn Corporation? Was she seriously trying to claim she was the daughter of the Lynn Corporation's chairman? It was only after we got off the plane that I realized she really was the daughter of the Lynn Corporation's chairman. When Jessica saw me still waiting for a car at the entrance, and her driver had already arrived, she turned to me and asked, "Why don't I give you a ride? I'm on my way to your company to see Alexia." "You must be Alexia's son, right?" I quickly said, No, I'm just an extra actor." Jessica gave me a faint smile. That stunning face of hers could make any young man fall in love at first sight, and in that moment it utterly shattered my rationality. She said, "Alexia once did my father a favor." "It's fine, I'll give you a ride." The very next second I blurted, "Okay then, let's go." But when we got near my company, I refused to get out of the car. I said I was hungry, and tricked Jessica into eating a bowl of wontons at a street stall. Then I managed to coax her into a fried chicken shop to try some chicken. Clearly she had never eaten such food before. She ate with an elegant posture, slowly and carefully cutting the chicken breast into neat little pieces with knife and fork. I stared at her in astonishment. She told me, "Thank you for bringing me to eat such delicious food." Chapter 5, New Year's Wish. I smiled at her and said, "Right, good food always makes people feel better, especially fried chicken." Jessica chuckled softly. "It really does lift my mood a little." "So, can we go see Alexia now?" I paused in silence for a moment before replying, "Wait, I'm still not quite full. Let's grab some afternoon tea first." As I had expected, by the time we came out after afternoon tea, night had already fallen. I turned to Jessica and pretended to sound regretful. "Oh no, it's too late. Let's meet Alexia tomorrow. How about we go see a movie first?" Jessica hesitated for a long while before finally nodding. It wasn't until later that I learned the truth. The day I met Jessica was only the second week after her parents and older brother had passed away. Because she refused to take over her father's company, she had been quarreling with him and ended up missing the last phone call they made before their fatal car accident. Originally, they had already bought plane tickets to Mexico, intending to surprise Jessica, who hadn't been home in 3 years while studying abroad. But on the way, tragedy struck. That last phone call to Jessica rang for a long time, but no one ever picked up. On the day she returned, her plan was to see the last few important people in her life, and then find a place to end it all. But instead, she happened to run into me, someone who was shamelessly drawn only by her beauty. I pestered her from dawn till dusk. Coincidentally, this heiress, who had always been accustomed to the finest delicacies, tasted street-side skewers for the first time, and ended up enjoying them with unusual delight. For a night, she forgot both her nightmares and the crushing grief of losing her loved ones. And in that fleeting moment, she suddenly thought, it shouldn't be now. There were still people she hadn't met, places she hadn't explored, things she hadn't tried. So, no, it shouldn't be now. For a long time after that, I didn't see Jessica again. I focused on filming my dramas, even though no matter how many times I acted, I always ended up crying miserably in front of the camera. The next time I heard about Jessica was on the news. First, I saw that at such a young age, she had taken back her father's shares and become the CEO of the Lynn Corporation. Then came the scandals linking her to Domingo. And eventually, Jessica suddenly contacted me herself, saying she wanted to sign a 2-year marriage contract with me, paying me $6 million upfront and another $8 million afterwards. When I heard such an unbelievable offer, I cautiously asked her assistant why she wanted to sign this marriage contract with me. Even the assistant didn't know. She only said not to overthink the rumors with Domingo, that Jessica was with me simply because I bore some resemblance to Domingo's face. I couldn't really say I felt disappointed. After all, Jessica and I had only met once. How could someone like her ever fall for me? In truth, at the very beginning of our marriage, I couldn't help feeling a faint attraction. Since from the moment I first met her, I knew her face was exactly my type. But after the wedding, Jessica always treated me coldly. Over time, I stopped holding on to any hope. I just focused on living my life properly. I understood very clearly that what we had was nothing more than a transaction. After hearing the truth directly from Jessica's lips, I felt something pounding a little too fast in my chest. I figured maybe it was just because I was in a good mood. Then it hit me belatedly, and I asked her, "So, what you mean is, you fell in love with me at first sight?" Jessica was silent for a moment before denying it. Not exactly. I felt a little disappointed. In fact, when she first signed the marriage contract with me, she only wanted to experience everything she hadn't tried before her life ended. She chose me because she found me interesting, and because she had never been in love before. At first, she thought that after 2 years she would just get tired of me. But later, for reasons she couldn't even explain, she began to care more and more. It wasn't until she learned that I only had 2 months left to live that she finally realized some feelings only reveal themselves when the great waves come, exposing just the tip of the bare rocks beneath. This kind of feeling wasn't habitual companionship. It was the kind of affection one only truly perceives at the brink of losing it. Hearing that, I stared at Jessica speechlessly and said, "Then why didn't you say so earlier? Why make all this fuss? Wouldn't it have been better to just explain it from the start?" Jessica cleared her throat a little awkwardly and replied, "I always thought you hated me. And then later you told me that me asking you to sign that contract was wrong, that it would make you think I treated you like a commodity, that I didn't respect you, and you've always acted so distant, like you were eager to cut ties with me. Remember that dinner party? You wouldn't even sit next to me." I fell into a strange silence, wondering if maybe my moral bottom line was too low. Otherwise, why was it that when I first learned I would receive over 10 million from signing that marriage contract, all I could think of was my giddy excitement at revenge, and not whether I respected her or not? After a while, I told Jessica, "Tell Selena she's overthinking, and next time there's such a good deal, make sure you call me again." Jessica glared at me angrily, while I gave an awkward laugh. Meanwhile, Domingo, who had been ignored for so long, just stared blankly at Jessica. After a long moment, his face twisted with despair and he cursed Jessica under his breath, calling her a heartless woman, before storming out and slamming the door. My luggage was still downstairs. Originally, I had planned to pack up and leave Jessica's house today, but I hadn't expected so much to happen all of a sudden. So now Jessica stood in front of me, blocking the door patiently, waiting for me to finish speaking. "So, are we still getting divorced?" I asked. Jessica looked at me with an amused expression. After a pause, I added, "But you haven't paid me the 8 million balance yet. If we don't divorce, I'll be at a bit of a loss." Jessica let out a laugh of exasperation. "A loss? If we don't divorce, you can have as many 8 million as you want." I nodded and said, "All right then." Jessica repeated my words in disbelief. "All right then. Why do you sound so reluctant?" I gave her a faint smile and replied, "Because I am reluctant. After all, you originally planned to give me a funeral." Later that evening, while we were having dinner at home, Jessica suddenly asked, "Do you know what day it is today?" I looked at her in confusion, and she pointed at the calendar beside us. Having just returned from abroad and after everything that happened, I had almost forgotten. New Year's was just around the corner. The housekeeper added softly, "Ever since the accident, every year the young lady has spent New Year's alone." Smiling, I took Jessica's hand in mine and told her, "From now on, I'll spend every New Year with you." At midnight, fireworks blossomed across every corner of the city. Whether it was me, Jessica lying in my arms, Domingo crying in heartbreak downstairs, or all the people in the world weighed down by life's burdens, we all raised our heads at the same time to watch the fireworks overhead. The brilliant sparks illuminated this vast world, as if the universe had pressed the pause button in that very instant. Mountains and rivers stretch far and wide, but human life shines in the fleeting glow of fireworks. As the fireworks burst above, I made a wish, raising my glass to the new year. "You worked hard this year too. Good night, see you next year."